Hello everybody and welcome back to the Sammy Snake Racing YouTube channel, home of the fastest snake in the world, your host, Sammy Snake. Now, do you play Gran Turismo 7 on a controller? Because if you do, this video is especially for you. Now, I do videos all the time giving tips, pointers, tricks on how to get faster at the game. And all of those tips, tricks, and techniques that I teach in these videos apply to both wheel and controller drivers. The fundamentals always still apply, but there are definitely some specific tips and pointers that are for controller users. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to give you 4 really good tips to help you get faster on a controller when playing Gran Turismo 7. So let's jump into it and find out what the first tip is. Okay, let's start with button mapping. This might seem like a very simple and basic tip, but don't worry, they get better as we go along. The first thing you want to make sure you've got mapped correctly is your steering inputs. Make sure to use an analog stick. You're not going to be able to control your steering inputs easily if you're using the arrows, so make sure that steering is mapped to an analog stick. And then for your acceleration and braking inputs, you want to be using R2 and L2. Some old school Gran Turismo drivers may be using X and square. The problem with that is you can only apply 100% throttle or 100% brake at one time. So when you are making your way around a circuit and need to trail brake or control your throttle inputs coming out of a corner, it is going to be near enough impossible to do that using X and square. So make sure to use analog stick for steering and your rear triggers for acceleration and brake. Another tip I can share with you is if you are struggling to be smooth with your inputs, even with an analog stick and these rear triggers, you can buy extenders and they're not very expensive. Basically these extenders, and I'll show a picture of what these look like, make the travel even further. So once you put an extender on it, the trigger has to travel further to go 100%. So therefore it's easier to apply small inputs. And the same goes for the extender on the analog stick. If it's higher, it has further to move left and right. So therefore you can manage your inputs. The last thing that I would say is essential as a setting on controller is to make sure you're using manual gears, not automatic. I have already done a video showing the difference in automatic and manual, and it is definitely faster to use manual gears. I would advise using X and square as your gearing because your thumb can naturally sit over the top of those and change up and down easily. It might not feel natural at first, but trust me, after a few laps or a few hundred laps, you will get used to it and you will be faster. So those would be the things that I would advise you do for button mapping. Everything else other than those settings is down to personal preference. Okay, so this next tip is a bit of a hidden setting that I don't think a lot of controller drivers are aware about. So on a wheel, you obviously get force feedback. I'm using a DD Pro, a Fanatec DD Pro 8 Newton meter wheelbase that gives me force feedback. When I'm turning the wheel, I can feel when it starts to understeer, it vibrates, it gives me all sorts of information. And a lot of people think that on a controller, you don't really get force feedback. Well, you do. It's obviously not as good as on a wheel, but there is a thing called haptic feedback. And within the game of Gran Turismo 7, it is default set to 100, but you can turn that up to 150. So make sure you go into this game setting in the controller settings and turn that from 100 to 150. And what that will give you is a stronger vibration through the controller. You may notice that you do get vibration through the controller. Now that is telling you when the car is starting to wheel spin, when it's starting to understeer, when it's starting to lose grip on what's happening underneath the wheels of the tarmac. So in order to get better feel for what the car is doing, you want to turn the haptic feedback setting all the way up to 150. Okay, for this next clip, I want you to pay attention to the game audio as we make our way around this track, Autopolis, in the Ferrari Testarossa, which is this week's daily race A. And I'm going to turn this vehicle from left to right down the straights, and I want you to pay attention to how much you can hear. And I'm not sure about you, but the main thing that I can hear is that Ferrari engine. Now, why is that a problem? Well, it's especially a problem on controller because you don't have as much feedback through a controller as you do on a wheel. So in order to try and overcome that issue, we want to try and get as many other pieces of information, such as tire squeal, to let us know when this car is starting to lose grip. So we can actually adjust that within the game sound. So let me show you where that is. So if we navigate to the top left-hand corner menu, go to options, select sound, and scroll down to the bottom, we will find options to turn down the engine noise and turn up the tire squeals. Now, as I mentioned previously, by hearing more tire squeal, that gives us more information as to when we're on the limit of grip or when we have exceeded that level of grip. So let's jump back to circuit and see how much of a difference that makes in terms of the audio. So here we are again, exactly same car, exactly same track, exactly the same conditions, this time with additional tire squeal, and straight away coming around that first corner, I can hear a lot more information. So let's try swerving down the straights. Yep. The cues that I'm getting are far superior now. So now not only have I turned up my feedback by turning up haptic feedback, I've now got additional information in game audio sound. So my next top tip would be to adjust your audio settings within the game to try and counter the lack of information you have through force feedback by getting more information with audio. Enjoying the video so far? Do me a favor, tickle that like button and subscribe to the channel. We're chasing 10,000 subscribers. So if you're enjoying the content and you want to see more, make sure you're subscribed, like the video, and if you're feeling generous, give me a little hype. Okay, let's get back to it. Now, this final tip is something that I actually learned from, I would say, the fastest controller player on Gran Turismo 7, Calster25. If you're not subscribed to his YouTube channel, you should. He's just started out, so go over there and show him some love. Also, check out the video we did where we interviewed him and we asked all of the questions about what makes him fast on controller, and that is the technique of making sure your steering inputs are smooth. The most common problem you see with controller users is sharp, jagged steering inputs, and it's extremely difficult to counter that even with analog stick extenders that you can purchase. That's because the travel is so small when you are moving from left to right. It's only a very small movement with that thumb. Now, the way to counter this and to make sure that your steering inputs are extremely smooth, because as we know, smooth is fast and fast is smooth, is to simply push that analog stick forwards, hold it there all the time, and use that circular casing in the controller as a guide. That smoothens out all of your steering inputs. If you hold that to the front and use that as your guide when you're turning left and right, it's night and day in how smooth the steering inputs become. Not only is that going to allow you to turn in better and gain more traction from not having sharp, jagged movements. Just imagine if you were in a real car and you were coming into a corner and all of a sudden you went like that to turn, you're going to create a load of understeer. So not only is it going to give you more grip in the corners, but it's going to vastly improve your tyre wear. Calster is an expert of overcoming the biggest shortcomings on controller, which is tyre wear. And the main reason why the tyre wear is so much worse usually on a controller is because of these sharp, jagged movements. So by moving this analog stick forwards, holding it there and using that as your guide to ensure all of your steering inputs are super smooth, not only are you going to be faster, but your tyre wear is going to be significantly improved. So this, for me, is the #1 tip to gaining more pace on a controller. If you're here to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. I hope these 4 tips help you to get faster if you are a controller driver, and hopefully maybe these tips can help you to beat some of your friends that are on a wheel and pedals. There's nothing worse than somebody spending thousands of pounds on a steering wheel and pedals and then getting beaten by somebody using a 40, 50 pound PlayStation controller. So fingers crossed it can help you to give some bragging rights. But for today's video, it's over and out from the Racy Snake. Take care and thanks for watching.